Good afternoon and welcome to a webinar on cosmetics claims, Words Do Matter, hosted by EAS Consulting Group and presented by independent consultant Norma Skolnick. EAS specializes in FDA regulatory matters with the prime focus of assisting domestic and foreign food, pharmaceutical, dietary supplement, medical device, tobacco, and cosmetics firms comply with applicable laws and regulations. EAS is staffed with former FDA compliance and inspection officials and industry executives and is assisted by an extensive network of consultants with many years of FDA and industry experience. Today's presenter is Norma Skolnick. Norma has over 35 years of regulatory experience working with pharmaceutical, OTC drug, consumer products, and dietary supplement industries, and has expertise in claims, labeling, and advertising reviews. Prior to consulting, Norma served as Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Americas for Cadbury Adams until her retirement. She also held positions of Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Adams Division of Pfizer and Associate Director for Regulatory Affairs for the Warner Lambert Company. As a reminder, during the webinar, you may ask any questions by typing them into the questions box. And with that, I will say thank you again for joining EAS, and I'll turn the presentation over to Norma.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Well, as you know, we're going to be discussing cosmetic claims today and the importance of the words that you use. Okay, next slide. Why words matter. The way that labels are worded and claims are made can make all the difference in a cosmetic product inadvertently being marketed as an unapproved drug. If a company crosses that line, FDA can take enforcement action, starting with a warning letter and ultimately requiring the company to change their marketing strategy and relabel their products. In the worst case scenario, products may have to be removed from store shelves. Next slide. It's important to consider the cosmetic regulations. the FD&C Act defines cosmetics by their intended use as articles intended to be rubbed, poured, sprinkled, or sprayed on, introduced into, or otherwise applied to the human body for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or altering the appearance. Among the products included in this definition are things like skin moisturizers, perfumes, lipsticks, nail polish, eye makeup, facial makeup preparations, cleansing shampoos, hair colors, and deodorants, as well as substances that are components of cosmetic products. Next slide. Cosmetic claims. Cosmetic labeling and advertising claims should be consistent with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act definition of a cosmetic's intended use to cleanse, beautify, promote attractiveness, and/or alter the appearance. Next slide. Drug claims. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because so many companies get into trouble because they make claims that they think they can get away with as cosmetics that are really drug claims. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act defines drugs by their intended use as articles intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of a disease or medical condition, and articles other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals. This is sort of sexist. It's the body, it should be the body of humans, but I didn't write the definition. In terms of cosmetic claims, there are therapeutic claims in cosmetics. Promoting a product with claims that it treats a medical condition like acne or rosacea or psoriasis or otherwise affects the structure or function of the body can cause the product to be an unapproved drug. And by a structure function of the body claim, I'm talking about things like claims like reduces cellulite, removes wrinkles or erases wrinkles, grows hair, repairs scars, erases scars. Those are all structure function of the body claims, and those are claims that violate FDA regulations. Next slide. FDA considers a cosmetic to be misbranded if its labeling is false or misleading, if it doesn't bear the labeling information that's required by FDA regulations, so those can be found in Title 21 of Code of Federal Regulations, Part 701. And drug claims or claims to affect the structure or function of the body, if those are made, then the product is considered misbranded. And I put a big note down at the bottom that websites are not exempt from labeling rules. I've had clients tell me in the past, oh, don't worry, we only make this claim on our website. It's not on our labels. Well, that doesn't matter to the FDA. What you put on your website is considered labeling just as much as if you put it on the package itself. And FDA is frequently surfing the web for claims that are in violation. And you're going to see later on in the presentation when I talk about some companies that have gotten warning letters that often the claims that are on their websites are the ones that get them into the most trouble. So just bear in mind, websites are not exempt. And drugs, specific types of products. These products meet the definitions of both cosmetics and drugs. This happens if a product has two intended uses. For example, a shampoo is a cosmetic because its intended use is to cleanse the hair. An anti-dandruff treatment is a drug because its intended use is to treat dandruff. Therefore, an anti-dandruff shampoo is both a cosmetic and a drug. Other cosmetic drug combinations are toothpaste that contain fluoride, deodorants that are also antiperspirants, and moisturizers and makeup marketed with SPF sun protection claims. Such products must comply with the requirements for both cosmetics and drugs, and they must have drug labeling, including a drug facts box. If your product makes any of those claims and you don't have full drug labeling in compliance with 21 CFR 201.66, your product is not in compliance with FDA regulations. In terms of cosmetic labeling claims, FDA is paying much more attention to cosmetic claims to assure that no drugs or medical devices are illegally marketed as cosmetics, and that no cosmetic makes a drug claim or claims that a product affects the structure or function of the body. FDA has recently issued an increasing number of warning letters because of unapproved drug and other illegal labeling claims and claims on company websites that violate the regulations. Next slide. One of the best ways that I felt I could illustrate how words matter when it comes to cosmetic claims and cosmetic labeling is with some examples of FDA over claims for their cosmetic products. And I'm going to show you some following FDA warning letters, all from the last 3 years. These are all very recent warning letters that illustrate such examples. Next slide. Here's an example of a cosmetic warning letter from 2016. The letters, you almost always, if you are in violation of making unapproved drug claims, start out by saying, this is to advise you that the FDA reviewed your, in this case, they're talking about a website, as I said, which probably means that their label may have been okay, but their website wasn't okay. So the letter says, this is to advise that the FDA reviewed your website at such and such a website address. The claims on your website establish that your product is a drug under Section 201 G1B of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act because it's intended for use in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease or to affect the structure function of the body of man. As explained further below, introducing or delivering this product for introduction into interstate commerce for such uses violates the above act. So what they're essentially saying, if you're selling this product with these claims, you violated the FDA law. Next slide. They go on, FDA goes on to point out the specific examples that they're talking about. And they have a big headline, unapproved new drug claims, just to make sure the company gets the message. And they give these examples. One of the claims that they were making on their website was remove wrinkles instantly. That's certainly a structure and function of the body claim. Another claim they were making is that their C-phenyl stem cell has the effect of lightening the skin. And then they go on to say another claim that was considered an unapproved drug claim was that tests of the culture have shown clear reduction of uneven pigmentation and obvious lightening of the skin. And last but not least, they say that the ingredient offers protection against UVB-induced free radicals. So besides all of the other drug claims, they're making a sunscreen claim, but the product was labeled only as cosmetic, not as a combination drug cosmetic. Next slide. Here's another warning letter from 2019, and I'm going to focus on part of this letter in terms of one of the specific issues. Here again, they say the FDA reviewed your website at the following internet address, and the claims in this case, they're going beyond the website. They're saying that the claims on your product labels, your promotional material, and your website establish that these products are drugs under Section 201 G1B, et cetera, et cetera. The products, they have a whole bunch of products, this company. The product Sleep Ease Tincture, Calm Child Tincture, Teething Tincture, Digestive Ease Tincture with Peppermint, Headache Ease Tincture. You can tell from the names of these products that they clearly are marketing them for drug disease prevention or treatment purposes. Anyway, so they say these are intended for use in the cure, treatment, mitigation, prevention of disease. And then they go on to talk about some other for Aches Plus Cream, Breathe Easy, Restore and Revive Plus Cream, and Sun Cream are intended for use in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease and or to affect the structure or any function of the human body. As explained further below, introducing or delivering these products into interstate commerce for such uses violates the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Next slide. And they give some examples. Now, I'm not going to list all the examples from this warning letter, but I want to focus on a couple of examples that were provided that raises an important issue. One of the sets of examples that they give was the company's facial moisturizing cream. They made the claim formulated with SPF containing oils that provide natural sun protection. Well, and also provides natural and mild sun protection. These claims, although this product was marketed as a cosmetic, these claims clearly make this product a sunscreen. So the only way you could market a product like this is to be in compliance with the sunscreen monograph and have full drug labeling. I'm going to talk about that a little further. And then also on the product page, the FDA goes on to point out, on the product page for the company's Restore and Revive Cream Plus, they made the claim, an amazing product for vast variety of skin ailments, such as eczema, wounds, rashes, including diaper rashes, psoriasis, cracked lips, irritated and or itchy skin, burns, acne, rosacea, and more. As if acne, rosacea, and psoriasis and eczema weren't enough. The next slide should point out some issues with regard to sunscreen. Further evidence, this is also quoting from the FDA, further evidence that your product is a drug is on the product page for sun cream, water-resistant SPF. They made the claim, provides safe, effective, chemical-free, broad-spectrum UVA, UVB protection for all ages. Clearly, this is a sunscreen claim. These minerals, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, provide a physical barrier reflecting and scattering damaging UVB and UVA rays before they reach your skin. And then they say equivalent to 30 plus SPF. Well, let me tell you, the claims that this product are making make this clearly a sunscreen that would require full sunscreen drug labeling in compliance with the sunscreen monograph. And if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that any product that has an SPF of 15 or above and that makes sunscreen claims is clearly a drug as well as a cosmetic and must carry sunscreen drug labeling, including the drug fax box, as I said, must comply with all OTC sunscreen monograph requirements, including testing, ingredients, labeling, dosage levels, and broad spectrum requirements as per Title 21 CFR Parts 201 and 310. Next slide. The reason I'm focusing so much on sunscreens, not only because you know it follows trouble, but I want you all to know, if you're not familiar with what's been going on with sunscreens recently, that FDA has been tightening up the regulations for sunscreen. Very recently, just on February 26th of this year, FDA proposed a new rule aimed at bringing OTC sunscreens up to date with the latest science and tightening the regulations. This is a major FDA proposal that addresses sunscreen active ingredient safety, dosage forms, sun protection factor or SPF, and broad spectrum requirements. It also proposes updates to how products are labeled to better identify key product information. The proposal has major changes, especially regarding ingredients that will impact sunscreen products. So it's very important that anyone marketing sunscreens be familiar with these requirements and be cognizant of the fact that while it's wrong to make drug claims in any area, unless your product is properly labeled as a drug in compliance with an appropriate monograph or an approved NDA. Sunscreens are a particular red flag for the FDA these days. I know a lot of companies in the past have thought that, well, sunscreens are, they're sort of cosmetics, FDA doesn't take them so seriously. Wrong, wrong, wrong. FDA takes sunscreens very seriously, and as this February 2019 proposed rule illustrates, FDA is really going after sunscreen compliance. So please bear that in mind. Okay, going on to another warning. This is one from 2018. Again, it starts the same way. FDA reviewed your website at the following internet address for the products listed in this paragraph. The claims on your product, labels, promotional material, and website establish that these products are drugs, etc. They go on to identify claims that were on this particular product, and this is something I want to talk about. The product in this case was called Rapha Remedy. Rapha Remedy is marketed as a cosmetic, but makes the following claims. Rapha, and this is what the claims on the label and the website said. Rapha Remedy is a soothing salve for treatment of symptoms of eczema and rosacea, clearly drug claims, cracked, dry, and itching skin, chickenpox, shingles, and psoriasis. The reason I wanted to focus on this particular letter is that the claim in the middle, cracked, dry, and itching skin, would have been okay. If this company had come to me and said, we want to make all these claims, of course I would have told them they can't make any claims for treating eczema or rosacea or chickenpox, shingles, or psoriasis. But if they had just said, Rapha Remedy is soothing for cracked, dry, and itching skin, that would have been okay. That's a fine, perfectly acceptable cosmetic claim. But because they threw this in, well, they did use the term treatment, and treatment is a drug term. They should not have said treatment of symptoms of cracked, dry, and itching skin. They should have said it's a soothing salve for way. They would have been okay, and they would have been able to make the claim on their product without ever being challenged. It's very doubtful that the FDA would have ever challenged this. But because they took this otherwise acceptable claim and they used it with the term treatment, and they lumped it together with claims for treating eczema and rosacea and chickenpox, shingles, and psoriasis, now they've lost all the claims. So, this is an example of, the expression, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Well, that's what they've done here. If they had only concentrated on that one claim that could have been acceptable, had they just said it's a soothing salve for cracked, dry, and itching skin, they would have been all right. But now that they've lumped it in with these other claims, they lost everything. They lost the store. And because the cracked, dry, and itching skin claim now has appeared in an FDA warning letter, they can't use that claim either. Okay, next slide. Next, I'd like to talk about cosmetics that are also medical devices. This is an area that's become much more visible in terms of FDA warning letters in recent years. Cosmetics that were drugs have always been an issue, although FDA is cracking down on that area now more than ever. But the medical device area is something that only in recent years has been getting a lot of FDA attention. First of all, I want to just make sure that everybody listening understands what is and isn't a medical device. A medical device is an contrivance, implant, or other similar article that's recognized either in the National Formulary or the U.S. Pharmacopoeia that's intended for use in the treatment, diagnosis, cure, mitigation, or prevention of a disease or a medical condition, or intended to affect the structure or function of humans. Recent FDA warning letters issued to manufacturers and distributors of medical devices marketed for regrowing hair, weight reduction, spider vein removal, dermabrasion, as well as injectable fillers and decorative contact lenses illustrate an important distinction, and that is the difference between the legal definitions of cosmetics and medical devices. Okay, next slide. Although the devices cited in FDA warning letters are intended to affect a person's appearance, the fact that they are intended to diagnose or treat a medical condition or affect the structure or function of the body makes them medical devices under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. A medical device cannot be marketed without FDA pre-market clearance. I hope you all understand. Typical medical devices are things like a thermometer, or in the case of a Class 3 device, a cardiac pacemaker. Those are medical devices. But recently, there have been a lot of devices that are intended to be used to treat the skin to improve appearance. Okay, let's go on to a 2017 warning letter that was sent to a medical device company. Now, this is a company that marketed the product as a device. They did not intend for it to be a medical device, I assume, and they were selling it just as a cosmetic. Okay, now this letter, which does not come, the other letters that I was citing for you came either from the district offices of FDA or from CEDAR, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. This letter comes from the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health, so it begins a little differently. They say, this is a 2017 letter, FDA inspections and review of materials collected during inspections reveal that, in this case, I'm going to tell you the name of the product because the name of the product, I think, will give you an idea of what the issue was. Reveal that Eclipse MicroPen Elite is adulterated under Section 501F1B of the Act, et cetera, because you do not have an approved application for pre-market approval in effect pursuant to Section 515 of the Act, et cetera, or an approved application for an investigational device exemption, an IDE, under Section 520 of the Act. The Eclipse MicroPen Elite is also misbranded under Section 5020 of the Act because you did not notify the agency of intent to introduce the device into commercial distribution as required by Section 510K of the Act. I hope you all know that if you want to market a medical device, you have to submit a 510K and comply with it. Specifically, this goes on with the same letter to this medical device company that was selling the product as a cosmetic. Specifically, FDA tells them, we have reviewed your product labeling for the Eclipse MicroPen Elite, including your firm's website, located at www.eclipseaesthetics.com, brochures and pamphlets, which revealed that the Eclipse MicroPen Elite system allows for controlled collagen induction therapy by creating micro-injuries in the skin, which trigger new collagen synthesis and is marketed to treat conditions such as the appearance of wrinkles, acne scars, and stretch marks. Next slide. For example, this is continuation of the same warning letter. For example, FDA's review of the product's labeling found the following description of the device. Now, bear in mind, this product was being sold as a cosmetic, and this is what they were saying about it. Automated microneedling, also known as collagen induction therapy, or CIT, is a new innovation in aesthetic medicine for the treatment of the appearance of fine lines, acne scars, and the improvement of the skin's texture, tone, and color. During this procedure, the Eclipse MicroPen is used to create controlled micro-injuries to the skin in order to aid in the production of collagen and elastin. The skin's repair process results in a thicker epidermis with a softer appearance of wrinkles. MicroPen Elite also creates microchannels, which allow topical gels, creams, and serums to be absorbed more effectively, enhancing the effects in deeper layers of the skin. Well, what this company has done is sort of a smorgasbord buffet of violative claims. First of all, they use the term aesthetic medicine. FDA does not recognize that, and actually even the term medicine is inappropriate for description of anything connected with a cosmetic product. But then they go on to say that, you know, it's going to treat acne scars, and to improve the nature of the skin. And they describe how the product works in a way that clearly makes the product a medical device. Remember, going back to the definition, the FDA definition, a medical device is an instrument, apparatus, implement, blah, 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 that's used to treat a medical condition. Well, that's what they're doing here. They're using this device to treat a medical condition. And certainly they're making claims for affecting the structure function of the body when they say that they're going to repair the skin and change the appearance of wrinkles. So, this product was clearly a medical device marketed as cosmetic. And anyway, I think FDA goes on to say that based on their review of the documents that they collected at this company, including their review of the firm's website, the Eclipse Micropan Elite appears to consist of a stamp of needles that's controlled by a motor in order to make multiple controlled depth penetrations perpendicularly into the skin. It is therefore under Section 501 F1B of the Act, et cetera, because you do not have an approved application for pre-market approval in effect pursuant to 515A of the Act, et cetera, or an approved application for investigational device exemption, an IDE, under Section 520G of the Act, et cetera. And they conclude by saying the Eclipse Micropan Elite is also misbranded under Section 502 of the Act, et cetera, because they didn't notify the agency of their intent to introduce the device into commercial distribution as required by Section 510K of the Act. So, bottom line, this company was in big trouble. In some cases, I just want to comment here, in some cases, the cases that were cited in the earlier warning letters, the product could be saved and still marketed by relabeling it, by changing the claims in their advertising and promotion, changing the claims on their website, and they could still market the product with those very significant changes. But in this case, this product was clearly a medical device marketed as a cosmetic. So there was no way that they could just relabel the product or fix the claims on their website or the claims in their advertising and promotion. This product would have to be marketed as a medical device, not as a cosmetic. And they would have to file all of the appropriate pre-market approval applications, 510K, with the Center for Devices and Radiology. Okay, next, I would like to talk about what happens if you do get a warning letter, some steps that need to be taken in responding to a warning letter. I mean, hopefully you will never get a warning letter. And if you bear in mind the differences between the appropriate claims for a cosmetic and the inappropriate to violative claims for cosmetics that could be considered drugs or medical devices, if you make the wrong kind of claims, you should not get a warning letter. But worst case scenario, suppose you do get a warning letter. A number of steps need to be taken. First, and this is what I always did when I was director of regulatory affairs at companies that I worked for, you draft and internally circulate the FDA warning letter itself, as well as the response you're planning to make. Prior to responding, you draft the warning letter, making sure to allow adequate time for revisions prior to meeting the response deadline, which is usually 15 working days. And when I say you internally circulate it, make sure in your company that everybody who is impacted by the warning letter and by the warning letter's response will know about this. So it's very important if you work, say, for example, in regulatory affairs, that this letter be seen not just by the regulatory affairs people, but by everyone in marketing that deals with the product manager, the graphics people, anyone who had anything to do with preparing the labeling, advertising, promotion, or website should see this letter. Also, you have to make sure that your legal department sees it. In some cases, you may want to circulate the letter to your quality control people as well. And it's very important. A warning letter is very serious, so it's important that everyone in your company that has anything to do with the product is aware of it. so they don't continue doing the same thing. You know, if you only circulate this letter to the people in regulatory affairs, it's very possible that your marketing or advertising people, the people at your advertising agency, may be continuing to make the same kind of claims on your website. So you have to make sure they're all cognizant of it. And by the way, make sure if you use an outside advertising agency that they are aware of it, because often those are the people who put these problematic claims on the website or in your advertising. Okay, so you draft and internally circulate the FDA warning letter and the response to it prior to responding in order to meet the deadline, which is usually 15 working days. Next, you need to outline a specific plan of action for addressing the specific violations that are raised in the FDA letter. You identify everything that's in the letter. Usually warning letters are lengthy and will often cover a number of areas. They might cover product labeling, they might cover advertising, promotion, website claims, pamphlets, brochures. Identify everything that's cited in the letter and outline a specific plan of action for addressing the violation. Prepare all new labeling, or we're going to take the website down and, you know, revise all of our claims being made on the website. We're going to revise the brochures or pamphlets, or, you know, revise our print ads. Whatever is identified in the letter should be, in the FDA letter, should be addressed in your response to that letter. So you outline a specific plan of action for addressing the violations raised in the FDA letter. Then you respond directly to the letter, which is usually from an FDA district office or from the Center for Devices, for the Center for Drugs and Evaluation and Research. Now, sometimes you might get a joint letter sent not only by the FDA, but recently there have been letters sent by the FDA as well as the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission, I think you all probably know, regulates advertising for over-the-counter drugs and dietary supplements. In some cases, the FTC does get involved with cosmetic advertising and promotion. So, and if you've made really egregious claims in both your advertising and promotion and your labeling, then you could get a joint letter sent by the FDA and the FTC. Now, you can, if you feel it necessary for clarification, you can call the identified FDA contact if needed prior to the formal response. Your letter will always have the signature of someone. It's often the head of the district office that handles you. You know, if you're in Brooklyn, it might be the head of the New York State FDA district office. And if you need some clarification, you could call that person. But you have to, you know, have a legitimate reason for calling. Sometimes there are issues that do need to be raised. You know, if, for example, suppose you just had a major printing and you've just printed thousands of labels and you're in the process of distributing product when you got this warning letter. You might want to address specifically with the FDA, well, what do we do with all of these newly printed labels? Do we have to destroy them? Sometimes the FDA will negotiate with you and they'll say, well, I mean, it depends upon the situation. You know, this is on a case-by-case basis usually. But sometimes they'll say, well, all right, you could use up the existing inventory as long as you make sure that you stop making these claims on your website, you stop using them in advertising and promotion and, you know, any materials that you're distributing. It depends. But if you feel it's necessary to call the identified FDA contact, if needed prior to the formal response, you can do so. But you have to make sure, though, that your letter is responsive to the FDA-specific concerns. I've had situations where a vice president once suggested to me, well, why don't we just tell them that we received their letter and we're considering our options and we'll get back to them. That is not an acceptable response. You have to have a plan of action for addressing the specific violations that have been identified in the FDA letter. Okay, well, that concludes the presentation for today. It's now about 1:15, so we have about 15 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much, Norma. We have a number of questions that have been sent in. And our first question is, do cosmetics using menthol, a monographed OTC ingredient, to make a cooling claim violate regulation and market a misbranded drug?
Wait, would you repeat that, please? I missed the beginning.
Sure. Do companies using a menthol, a monographed OTC ingredient, to make a cooling claim violate regulation and market?
No. A menthol claim for cooling that's a sensory claim. Sensory claims are okay. Now, if you said something like, no, menthol cooling would be an acceptable claim if you only said cooling. Now, if you said, for example, menthol cooling to help relieve a sore throat, then it becomes a drug claim. But if it's only menthol cooling for, say, a topically applied cream or ointment, that's a sensory claim, and sensory claims are okay.
Okay. What is
for a cosmetic?
Thank you. What is required to substantiate safety in a cosmetics product and for a cosmetic ingredient in a cosmetics product?
Okay, well, safety, it's up to the it is up to the manufacturer or distributor, but usually to the manufacturer, to assure the safety of the cosmetic ingredient. Actually, could be this is a big, important question, and it could be the subject of a whole different webinar. There's something called the Cosmetic Ingredient Review, and if you are in possession of the Personal Care Products Council dictionary, they have a review of all cosmetic ingredients that I'm trying to find where this is, but they have a review that gives you all of the appropriate ingredients and lists, the status of those ingredients, as well as nomenclature for how the ingredients should be labeled. By the way, if this person wants to send me an email at you'll see on the slide, nskolnick@EAS Consulting Group. If you want to send me your email address, I'm going to send you information about the Personal Care Products Council Ingredient Review Dictionary that certainly should be consulted to check your ingredients and see whether or not they're acceptable for cosmetic use in the United States. As far as safety, you have to make sure that the product is safe for human use, and also that you have appropriate warnings to assure the safety, so that if the cosmetic could be misused or used inappropriately, that you warn consumers about safety issues. Things like, when cautionary statements such as keep out of the eyes, or avoid eye contact, or avoid application to broken skin. Those warnings, help assure the safe use of your product. In addition to general warnings like keep out of reach of children or for external use only. those also help you assure the safe use of the product. But if you send me an email, I'll send you the information about the ingredient listing dictionary.
Is there anything specific that foreign companies need to know for compliance when selling products in the U.S. via the internet?
Yes, via the internet. Well, first of all, the most important thing that a foreign company needs to know, not only does your product need to be in compliance with all FDA requirements, but that when your product is imported into the U.S., it will be inspected. And so you have to make sure that your product is in full compliance with labeling requirements, and all ingredient information, and also that your ingredients are in compliance with FDA regulations, so that your product will pass an FDA inspection. And actually, it's really not fair, but actually imported products coming from a foreign country get much greater scrutiny than products that are made in the U.S., because you do have an FDA inspector who will review the product when it comes into this country. And they can put your product on hold and not allow it into the United States if they think there's an issue.
Great, thank you.
And your product being sold on the internet should bear that in mind, that, if you're selling products, it has to be able to pass that FDA inspection when it's brought into the U.S.
Thank you. I see a couple questions regarding U.S. agents and what's required of a U.S. agent. I'll just direct those people to the EAS website. We have a section under resources called On-Demand Webinars, and there was a webinar in the past year presented by our Senior Director for Pharmaceutical and Medical Devices, Brian Coleman, and his associate, Victoria Pankovich, and that discusses the requirements for U.S. agents, registrations and listings, things like that in greater detail.
Excellent.
Back to questions regarding claims. We have another one here where a participant in the audience wants to know if there is a consolidated list of acceptable claims for cosmetics.
No, where is it? There isn't. No, there isn't. There's no list of acceptable claims, except for with regard to OTC drugs or monograph products. Then there are claims listed and labeling that's acceptable that's listed in the monograph. So, for example, it doesn't really apply to cosmetic products. Although I would say the most important thing to bear in mind in making a claim is that original cosmetic definition of the intended use. Your claim should meet the intended use. But for products that are like sunscreen, that are both drugs and cosmetics, or dandruff shampoos, in that case, there are acceptable claims and acceptable labeling statements that are listed in the monograph, but only in those categories. So if you're marketing a dandruff shampoo, say, or if you're marketing a deodorant that's also an antiperspirant, or if you're marketing a skin moisturizer that's also a sunscreen, or if you have makeup, makeup foundation that has SPF 15 or above, then if you go to the sunscreen monograph, or you go to the other monographs, the monograph for dandruff shampoos, there you do have a listing of acceptable label statements and claims. They're in the monograph, but that only applies to products that are both cosmetics and OTC drug combinations. In terms of acceptable claims for cosmetics, as long as you stay with the intended use, going back to the first slide of, to cleanse or to alter appearance, if you stick with that, you're okay. And also, if you avoid terms that are specifically drug terms, you probably will be okay. And by drug terms, I'm talking about avoid terms like treat or treatment, or certainly mention any particular medical condition. A lot of people, by the way, don't, who are first marketing cosmetics, don't understand that a medical condition is treated just as seriously as a disease. They seem to think, as long as you don't say, that it's going to treat a disease like chickenpox, that you're okay. If you say you're going to treat acne, acne is not really a disease, but it's still a medical condition. That's just the same as if you made a disease prevention claim. So it's a question of staying within the parameters. And if in doubt, that's what the EAS consultants are for. That's what we help with. As I said, if that company that got that warning letter had come to me with those claims, I would have told them, wait a minute, there's one claim here you really could make if you just reword it slightly. But instead, they went ahead and they threw in the whole kitchen sink with all the other claims, and they lost the claim that would have been acceptable. But unfortunately, to answer your question, there is no list of acceptable claims except for those things that are both drugs and cosmetics, like sunscreens.
Okay, thank you. The next question is not specific to claims, but I think it's a great question, and that is, how can companies be sure that their partners and suppliers are reputable? What kinds of questions should they ask?
To make sure that they're what are reputable?
Their suppliers.
Oh, that they're suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here again, unfortunately, there's no acceptable list of suppliers. But if your supplier doesn't supply you with adequate information about the nature of the ingredient and it's the ingredient's compliance, I would have some issues about that area. Actually, that is more in the area of quality assurance. And this is why it's so important for regulatory people to work closely with the QA people, because they're the ones that usually can identify a supplier that's acceptable from one that, could create issues.
Okay, great. That's all the time we have for questions today. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us. Our next webinar is next week, May 14th on Tuesday, and it is compliance with 21 CFR Part 11, which is electronic signatures, electronic data. So that one will be really helpful and applies to all FDA regulated areas. And in addition, on June 13th, we have a webinar on GMPs for OTCs, and that is presented by Brian Coleman, our Senior Director for Pharmaceuticals and Devices. And we invite you to join us for both of those, and of course, any other EAS webinar at any time. You may register on the EAS Consulting Group webpage. And we also invite you, of course, to review our on-demand webinars, lots of articles. You can just type your interest into the search bar and hopefully find any information that you were looking for. So thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all. And if that person who asked the question about ingredient safety sends me an email, I'll be glad to respond to them with the information.
Thank you.
Okay.